Next up, we'll start with the panel discussion. The panel, again, is about journey towards possibilities for new 5G use cases. And I'm very thrilled to have a very interesting set of panelists who are going to join me today. So let me call up on stage, first of all, Shri Suvesh Chattopadhay, who's the General Manager at Adani Data Networks. Hello, welcome on stage. Next up, we have Ms. Monika, who's the Vice President at Capgemini. Welcome, Monika. Next up, I'd like to call Mr. Mysore Madhusudhan, who's the Executive Vice President of Collaboration and Connected Solutions at Tata Communications. Welcome, Madhu. Next up, Mr. Sandeep Gupta, who's the Enterprise Vice President and the Chief Architect of Network at Bharti Airtel. Hi. And to round up the panel, we have Mr. Ashwini Bakshi, who's the Chief Sales Officer at Sterling Technologies. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome on board. First of all, it has been quite an interesting day today. And for those of you who've been in the inaugural session, today we've heard about this being a momentous day, a milestone day in the Indian telecom, with the launch of 5G services in India. We've also seen aggressive roadmaps for rollout, including 8 cities by one operator and promise to cover every tehsil by end of this calendar year by another operator. So we have a lot of interesting times ahead in terms of seeing this rollout, etc. But a couple of quick points to set this context. So first of all, what is the big deal about 5G? And we heard from Josh about, is 5G just another G, right? I think it's useful to set things into context. So this morning in the inaugural session, I ran a speed test on my phone, and the download speed was about 15 Mbps. At home, I have fiber to the home, so the speed is about 10x, 150 Mbps. For those of you who walk the halls, you'll see live demos of 5G on some real handsets, and the speed they're clocking is 1.5 gigabits per second. So it's not an order of 5x, 10x, it's a 100x increase in what you're seeing today in terms of mobile data. In Silicon Valley, we have a saying about what we call moonshots, right, which are a 10x improvement on what is current. So here we're talking about 100x. So the key point to note is that it is not about, you have a car which is driving faster. It is an order of magnitude better in terms of bandwidth and capacity. And what that leads to in terms of use cases, not everything is known today, right? A lot of things will evolve, a lot of interesting use cases, business models will evolve, and it will change things in ways we can't possibly imagine today, right? That's what is the powerful story behind 5G. The second part is about how does someone consume 5G? Today we heard the Honorable Prime Minister talk about the fact that we have access to devices today. So devices, thanks to Make in India, PLI, etc., Manufacturing India, we have accessible 4G devices at a price point of $100, right? Which is very, very affordable and in reach of a large variety of subscribers. And we've seen in Josh's presentation that 10% of them are already 5G enabled. So device is the first entry point, and we are seeing a lot of access already, right? The second point is affordability of data. Already, India has among the lowest rates of data in the world, and 5G creates an order of magnitude change in terms of capacity. So the rate that we pay for data is set to decrease further. So data, again, a key enabler, is set to become, easy and enabling function here. That leaves a third part, which is the digital transformation, right? This is the foundational elements are devices and data, but the digital transformation is where the magic happens. And that is where we're going to discuss with the panel today about what is the art of the possible, what we are seeing, what the industry participants are excited about. In terms of 5G, we're already seeing a lot of investments in digital by a lot of companies. We've seen sensors, we've seen a lot of devices getting connected, we've seen a lot of processes getting connected. I think with the advent of 5G, the expectation is that not just device or process, but wholesale functions, wholesale companies can get fully integrated. At KPMG, we call this a connected enterprise. And that's where we see the possibilities emerging. In terms of possibilities, we're going to look at the B2C, B2B, as well as government to consumer as well. So with that, I'll just hear the views of my panelists. We're going to keep this in 3 broad topics. The first part is about, like we heard, what is the art of the possible with 5G? What are the use cases? What are we excited about? What are we seeing which can be implemented from other countries, etc.? The second broad topic is, what is the ecosystem which is needed to bring this together? Because to make a 5G use case happen, you have a variety of players required. You have the sensor, the OEM for that, you have the connectivity layer, you have the platform layer, you have the analytics layer, you have the action layer, right? What are all the ecosystem participants which need to come together to make this happen? And the third part to round it off is a quick summary about what we feel is the maturity of India in terms of 5G. What are the key challenges, roadblocks, etc.? And what can the government do in terms of enable the roadmap? As we've seen in many other cases, a synergistic partnership between government and industry has really worked wonders. And we'll take the views of the participants about what help or what support can the government provide. So with that, let me get started. Maybe we'll go each in turn on the first question about the use cases, right? So, maybe we'll start with you, Ms. Ashwini, about, what you feel are viable use cases that you see already emerging. We've seen, the launch plans already announced. So, obviously, a launch without takers is of, no consequence, right? So, what are the immediate use cases you think? We've heard cases about, in the booth, you'll see agriculture, education, manufacturing, logistics, etc. But what are the things that you're excited about, what you feel are really ready and ripe for disruption?
Sound check. Thank you, Chaitanya. It's great to be here on the panel with everybody. First of all, I would say that, today marks the start of 5G in India in many ways. I would say let's build it first, right? So use cases will come, but we gotta build it first. There's a lot of work ahead in building out the end-to-end network capability. The Prime Minister spoke very compellingly about the 4 pillars that is driving digital India. He spoke about data, he spoke about devices, spoke about connectivity and networks, he spoke about a digital-first mindset. So we are really at the starting point with building the network. So I would start with saying that.
Absolutely.
Then when it comes to the use cases, there are several, as you said. Let's look at the country that we are in India, right? We are 1.4 billion people. We are a developing nation. We have a GDP which needs to be 10-folded to $20,000. How is that going to happen if not by educating the people? We have to grow a generation, maybe 2 generations of digital natives, people who grow up with using 5G networks and artificial intelligence and analytics and so on as being very natural in the same way that smartphones or YouTube watching is natural today. So I would say that digital education for everybody has got to be a priority use case. And I was struck by the hologram use case this morning, and it was simply amazing. And if you combine that with what one of the professors was showing about the heart, you can imagine the richness of that interaction if you marry the learner, the teacher, and the content in full 3D glory delivered over a wireless device. And you can globalize that. You can imagine that little girl that Modi ji spoke to could have been interacting with a Nobel laureate in the United States or in Sweden or wherever. Very, very powerful. If we can enable that, we would have created a fantastic use case. We then, I think, would have to concentrate, and I think it was on Josh's slide, the top right-hand quadrant, and the PM spoke about it. We will have to integrate 5G, but the larger digital paradigm into everyday lives of people. And people, ordinary people like us, we are trying to achieve economic outcomes. We are trying to achieve health outcomes. We are trying to achieve learning outcomes. How can we weave in 5G into that? All of that is not here yet, but we see enough examples from other countries, we'll talk about that later, to tell us that there is a very rich vein of use cases that we can bring in. But let's start with what we have in front of us right now. Get the ecosystem built, get the networks built, start with the fundamental building blocks. Let's start with education.
All right, well said. I think there's a popular saying that build it and they will come, right? So I think this probably summarizes what you're trying to say. Next up, Sandeep, I think, wanted to hear from your operator perspective because obviously we've announced a rollout plan and obviously of the panelists, you're probably the most keen to make sure that something real, tangible accrues, right? So your perspectives on the use cases.
Yeah, thanks, Chaitanya, for having us here. A pleasure to be in this historical movement that we now realizing that 5G is with us today and going forward. I think the last years of effort from our teams internally have really come live with 5G in the hands of our consumers. And I'd like to spend a minute, Chaitanya, just to make things simple to the audience here, that if you have, what Airtel has done is if you have a 5G smartphone, you just get the 5G services by default because your SIM is already 5G enabled. So in 8 cities that we just talked in today's morning, you actually can experience 5G on your own handset. And we did this with few of our customers in the morning. And Chaitanya, just to share that number with you, in the hall, we were getting 700 Mbps of throughput on the 5G handset. So obviously it is many X better as compared to the 4G, and that creates more and more opportunities. But it is, as we are saying, beyond just connectivity to the smartphones. So what all are the art of possible with 5G? Let's talk a little bit about it. One other aspect that I like to share with the audience here is that we've been working for the last 2 years in terms of how enterprises can leverage 5G and 4G networks along with other technologies that are coming together. Over the last 2 years, we've seen engagements with a lot of these industries, healthcare, education, agriculture that we talked in the morning, in terms of how they can come around and use this technology to really transform and revolutionize their own operations. I'll pick 3 examples, maybe just to make it simple. What we talk about use cases for enterprises, we're talking about connecting their machines, connecting their resources, which means the humans, and obviously having everything as a digital twin in terms of with all the capabilities of analytics, IoT, edge computing. Now, just taking example, like during this trials, we actually engaged with some of the enterprises that I can talk about. We're talking to Bosch, we're talking to Apollo, we're talking to Maruti. And what we're realizing is that their assets are so heavy. We just heard that it's going to be flip side. The physical industry is going to be more spending on this 5G and digital networks or private networks, where their assets can become more operationally efficient. All the telemetry that you can extract from their machines predict the maintenance cycle rather than going for a fixed maintenance cycle. And when we talk to the enterprises, they really are excited about just this being a very simple use case, saying that can you predict a failure or a maintenance instance rather than having the machine or the assembly line to go into a known or a fixed maintenance cycle, because that's a loss of efficiency to them. Bringing video analytics for either safety of the workers or even for bringing quality in the product. When you're looking at a complete assembly line and your products are getting rolled out in different phases, can you bring video analytics at the pace of the assembly line itself and make sure that you're identifying the faults while the product is getting built? So I think there are very simple things that we need to pick up. Obviously, 5G, IoT, edge compute, analytics, computer vision is going to put all things together in terms of making it happen in the reality. So I think there is certainly art of possible that is going to come in front of us. Really excited about it. The other thing we're talking about is how we can connect our enterprises and homes in remote location, which were unconnected, which are still remaining unconnected because of the challenge of distance and fiber not being able to traverse to those locations. And I think this is the next thing that we're going to see, but that's going to be more about extending business as usual. Beyond that, we certainly see our smart cities getting realized using these technologies coming together. So I think these are thoughts that we would have. We're working very closely with government, enterprises, stakeholders that we'll talk about as part of your second question. So really exciting.
All right. Thank you, Sandeep. I think at the inaugural session, I must confess, even I tried to get onto the 5G network, but couldn't manage. So good to hear it actually exists and it's available to everyday customers. The second point also is very interesting. If you look at enterprise transformation, we've had a wave of transformation where a lot of companies adopted ERPs, right, for the back office transformation. Then came the era of SaaS and front office transformation. Again, a lot of companies invested in front office transformation. But really the core operations, the manufacturing, the logistics, the supply chain, that area is ripe for disruption. What Sandeep called the physical processes and the physical part of the value chain is still ripe for disruption. I think that's where 5G is really exciting. Next up, Madhu, if you would like to give your perspectives, right, on the use cases, what you think are the exciting ones, which ones are real, which ones are hype? Yeah, your take, please.
Yeah, of course. First of all, great perspectives from both of you. 5G itself, I think this is the first, in a sense, if I have to call it as an access technology, which is evolving at the back of digitization or the industrialization or the B2B, and hence the use cases, the possibility of various use cases. That's how the need of the 5G itself has come in. If we just go back to history, it has started from 2G, 3G, 4G. It was not that the need was not there. To an extent, the technological capability to handle the kind of use cases itself, to an extent, it was a limitation. So that's where I would put it. Having said that, just having a 5G technology evolution itself coming up to certain speed, it is important that starting from a sensor, the devices which that sensor gets in, and the device, the ecosystem, how the microelectronics segment is getting evolved, and that get embedded into devices, into the whole, the technology, infrastructure, what is being put in. And then down below is that physical infrastructure. There is a huge investment for a country or for an enterprise or for any service provider to be doing it. In fact, one of the questions which was asked earlier was also that, is industry ready to take on this kind of investment for the use cases, or do we have the enough use cases for to consume those the investment what we have been doing? Absolutely, the answer is absolutely yes, because it is just that the technological limitation which was leading to not having those use cases. I pick up from what Sandeep was mentioning. In fact, frankly, the kind of use cases broadly, if you look at it, whether it is a mobility related use cases or whether it is a non-mobility related use cases. Broadly, from an IoT perspective, irrespective of the what kind of access technologies what's there, it is only a question of how those industry adopts based on the technological capability that is there. Today, manufacturing or industry 4.0 automation is primarily driving how this 5G itself could be utilized that much more, and hence the adoption that is leading into it. It can be an automobile sector. Just to give an example, one of the focus, one of the use cases what we are working was to give a broad spectrum of how this whole automobile sector itself works. I use a word called research to road. The meaning, research to road is the one where when a automobile, whether it is a passenger vehicle, commercial vehicle, public vehicle, or heavy vehicle, whatever, at a research state, what are the data back and forth goes in a factory environment, which comes under a private network. Then once it matures, how does it get produced, and what are all the quality insights and not so good quality rejections that needs to be happening, how does that manage? I'm talking the logistics, it's again all of them under digitization and the context. Moving into that is the production, the operational rigor, operational benefits, or the operational production efficiency, what we are able to do it. Then move into the post-sales dealer network management, your public, when the vehicle is on the move, how does that gets, from an IoT context, it gets managed? When you look at it, the art of possibility is humongous, despite the industry seeing a huge investment to be put as 5G network itself. I see this as 5G is only the beginning. It's only the 5G plus, I call it. Tomorrow it is 6G or whatever. It is only an efficiency of the technology getting more and more availability of the bandwidth for the use cases that is expected to be done. That few thoughts on it.
All right, thanks for that, Madhu. I think it's a great perspective that essentially the constraint is not really supply, right? The constraint is about the demand or how ready is the large enterprise segment to adopt or to transform themselves, right? That's a limiting factor essentially, right? So next up, Monica, your perspective on what you see are viable use cases, and any other thoughts from what you've heard before from the other panelists about what does it take, right, to make it a successful launch for 5G?
Sure. So I don't think I will repeat anything what they have said, and they've already elaborated something. Something which I personally tell about the potential of 5G, and I think some people amongst you who know me would have heard. I mean, all through mobility, be it 2G, 3G, or 4G, we have seen the difference which this little instrument has made in our lives. Now just apply this technology in its better avatar, which Chaitanya beautifully explained, 100 times faster and higher throughput, into the industry enterprise world and into the society, cities, macro, media, entertainment, health and other sectors. You have literally covered two important categories of our being rather than just being individuals. So if you look at an economy, it is industry, society, and individuals. You've covered the 2/3, and that's the potential. But then again comes the question, and which is thank you for that follow-up question. What is needed to make it happen? And that's where the real work which is needed, because to make it happen, what has worked for us as individuals, and by the way, it hasn't worked in a day or two, it has taken us 8 years or even more to make this happen. In industries, it will be even more tougher or even more work required, I may say, because in industries, you are now transcending into the core operations, and so which is where you have to integrate connectivity, which is just a part of their network, into their IT layer and into their operational layer. Previously to this, no mobile technology, no wireless technology has ever been used by industry in their core operations. And that's the work which we need to do. And then in that, combine it and leverage it with other technologies, with the sensors, with the platforms, with the distributed compute, with the manufacturing execution systems, with the automotive onboard chips and all. There's a lot of end-to-end solutioning and integration, which is the real work, and which is what I think we all need to build and deliver.
All right. No, thanks, Monica. I think last up on this topic, we've heard a variety of different perspectives, but Suvesh, from your perspective, right? Again, in terms of 5G, a lot of folks who are invested in this offering in this industry are guilty of hyping things up. So your views on what is the art of the possible? What are the use cases? What are some things that you've actually done, right, which are working very well for you?
Certainly. In this podium of distinguished panelists, I think I'm the newest in the 5G field, having spent only 5 months. So I have a simplified perspective, possibly an oversimplified perspective, how we look at things. So we started our journey by asking a question: what is a use case? As simple as that. The answers we got primarily from our business units within the Adani group, that it's a requirement which has not been met, it's a problem which has not been solved, it's a pain point which is stopping a business unit from reaching its potential. The second question was, can 5G alone solve all the problems? The question is clearly no. So way we position 5G and its use cases, that it's one part of the total digital solution needed to make a business function or increase efficiency. With this perspective, we've been to different business units, but a different response from each unit. I'll talk about one where we got the best response so far. It's our port business unit. There we realize is that they have fiber, which serves certain part of the port, certain requirements. They have Wi-Fi, which does some part of the work. But still there are identified requirements where these, despite having fiber, despite having a Wi-Fi, the requirement not being met. For example, we have 64 trains, we call RTG trains, in Mundra port. Half of them are enabled for remote operations. Only 1 or 2 are being used. When we figure out why, we realize that each crane has got 10 cameras, based on which an operator figures out how to pick up the container and how to place it in either a truck or a rig. Now, each of these cameras requires a 10 megabits feed, and total it's more than 100 megabits, which the Wi-Fi system is not able to support. So that's the reason we realized that despite having the capability of remote operations, which is the first step towards automation, we are using them in manual mode. So we found one use case. Secondly, we realized that in the port every day, there are 10,000 trucks, let's call it trucks, are entering. And they have one of the key imperatives that we have from various perspectives to ensure they spend minimum amount of time in the port. Today they are spending 6 hours. The target is to reduce it to 2 hours. So how the truck comes in, how much it spends in each gate. There are 6 gates to cross. Where did it stop? Does it stop in the right place in the first time, or does it be guided to the right place? And how long does it take from the time it docks in the right place and the container is loaded? So then we realized some fleet management is needed. We realized we had to identify the truck, the driver, and the cargo it carries. So we were working on a solution for that. Along with this, we realized there are 20,000 people which come in the port every day. Some of them are employed, some of them are not employed, they're contract people who come in. So at many times they stray into areas where they are not supposed to go, restricted areas, hazardous areas. So they want a solution to do scanning of people, and they figure out how to create geofencing or network fencing. So their alarms are raised when they find a person going there, and they're able to identify a person who is straying into those areas. Lastly, we realized there are more than 100 people whose only job is to go around the port and figure out the assets laying around and create a manual tabulation. That's when we said, why don't you use a drone? They said, we used a drone, it was not effective. When we dug deeper into it, we realized that the way the solution was implemented was not proper. It was not integrated, as people said, that just having a drone, just having a 4G modem into it, just getting the data is not sufficient. The drone data has to be analyzed. Whatever footage the drone gets, the software behind it should be able to analyze which asset is it tracking in the drone. The AI models have to be trained in that model. The annotations have to be done. That's when the drone pictures can make sense and some asset management can be done. So there we found at least a set of 5 use cases. And next is airports. In airports, we realized that they have almost 4,500 cameras. There are 1,500 PTT handsets. And we spoke to people, they said the PTT handset there sucks. It doesn't meet the requirement. They want MCPTX. So we are now working towards creating a demo for them with some of our partners to see that, give them experience of PTX. If it meets their expectations, then we can roll it out at all the airports that we have. So this is a glimpse of use cases that we are working on at this point in time. Thank you.
All right. No, thank you, Suvesh. I think one great perspective we just heard from Suvesh is that, to take a step back and think about what is a use case, right? A use case is not something for which an offering exists, but rather for one for which a need exists, right? I think it's a great perspective to reset what we are thinking about. And I think that's a good wrap up of, the first segment, which is about use cases, what we feel, what we think, and so on. And Suvesh also mentioned one interesting thing about 5G being one tool in your digital transformation toolkit, right? It is not a silver bullet, etc. And it's a great segue to my second question. 5G is one enabler, right, to a digital transformation. And a lot of the excitement about 5G is because it also helps some of the other transformational technologies also live up to potential. For example, we saw in the boost, you'll see a lot of VR headsets, you have AR headsets, etc. We see a lot of work around IoT and blockchain, some of which needs high throughput. Again, 5G can be an enabler. So 5G is really transformational, not just in itself, but also because it can bring a lot of these other technologies also live up to their potential. So with that as a perspective, and we live in an age where everyone's realized that we live in an ecosystem. No one company can deliver an entire suite of capabilities by itself. We live in a generation which is about platforms and SaaS and APIs and so on. And so is the case with 5G as well, right? It's a part of the ecosystem. So with that as a framing question, maybe we'll go in the reverse order this time. Suvesh, if you want to start about to actually make a 5G enabled digital transformation happen, right? what does the ecosystem look like? What are the success factors in this ecosystem coming together?
Sure, that's an interesting question. We explore that also. The main element that we observe are in two parts. First is the business function or the organization's readiness to accept a 5G solution. They need to have certain amount of streamlined processes, workflows, applications, cloud journeys, application modernization happening, so that they are ready to accept a solution. Second is a set of tools, set of devices that can gather the information based on which the automation journeys can be derived. So the 5G network helps to connect all these sensors, all these different, it could be CCTV cameras, it could be sensors, it could be data streams from different sources. They have to be collected in a place. You need to have a platform to analyze that data. And analysis is only one part of it. It has to lead to an actionable outcome also. That actionable outcome has to trigger a change in the system. So we found that unless all these elements are in place and they act in concert, 5G enablement will not be effective. So what we realize is that we can build competency within our business unit to design a network, deploy a network, maintain and operate a network. But if you want to look at the solution engineering, system integration, sensorization, I need a bunch of partners. So having reached this stage, our next part of the journey is about onboarding those partners. So we have realized that we cannot build all these competencies in-house. Each business unit brings a set of skills about their business. We can leverage that. We can benefit from it. But we still require a very strong solution integration partner who can make the use cases work end-to-end so the desired benefits can be realized by deploying 5G. That's about it.
All right, thank you. So I think a good way to also summarize that is that you said a lot of it is about making sure the organization is ready and geared up for it, helping them with change management. Also about thinking through the entire process end to end to see what is possible and then stitch the solution together, right? And which can be done in-house or externally as the case may be. So Monika, your take as well. Obviously, Capgemini like KPMG also is in the business of advising clients. So your take on what we just heard from Suvesh as well.
Absolutely. So, I think Suvesh has very brilliantly, covered the aspects from an enterprise point of view. Now, from a solution provider point of view, just let me kind of give my perspective. So, when you look at any enterprise adopting a new technology, like he said, it is the business outcomes which are relevant. And which is where setting up, I think, a 5G private network or a 5G connectivity is perhaps one step. I'm not going to say it's very easy or very tough, but it's just one step. But making it translate into business solutions, all the brilliant, I wouldn't even say use cases, but all the brilliant operations which he mentioned, fleet management, remote operations, which were the other ones? They were quite very, very interesting use cases which he mentioned. The solution has to translate to that. And there are existing, components, functionalities which are already there. So, and with those existing components, so, they would definitely have some cloud solutions. They would definitely have on-prem application software. They will definitely have existing devices. They would also currently have existing connectivity, most of it wired LAN industrial connectivity. So it's not a rip and replace. 5G will come and augment that. And so each player who is existing has to then either up that, or new players have to come in and have to stitch the existing with the new. And that's what the ecosystem is. If you just translate it, it is basically, even today, the connectivity players who are currently there would be the ones who would be offering 5G connectivity also. So perhaps the ecosystem will remain the same, but then each player will have to come and offer the Delta new solution, and most importantly, with that Delta, stitch it end to end. And I think the key challenge is the stitching end to end, because otherwise the fleet management or any of the business outcomes which he's looking for will not work.
Thanks, Monika. I think to your point about the system and business integration. So Madhu, from your perspective, right, as someone who's actually implemented already a large part of what we've just heard, as a practitioner's perspective, right? So what does the ecosystem look like? What are things that work, which haven't worked, which can work better?
No, absolutely. In fact, I resonate while Monika was talking. And then, of course, he was living the problem, and hence how the usage is happening. So basically, the way I look at it, if somebody is wanting to look at a transformation, in a sense, digital transformation, it is not somebody is talking about digital transformation, some IT setup, they will do something, or somebody will buy a network, or some business strategy is being worked in a siloed manner. It's never that. This 5G as one of the enabler is becoming the business conversation. It's not a technology transformation, or it is not a process transformation, or it is not just some, what do you call, I need to have some nice to have things and then while I do my business. It's not that way, because it has an impact on how the whole of the strategy of a business itself is there. Because today, if I am planning a manufacturing, in fact, this is a live example which we have been doing. In one of the manufacturing setup to whom we are setting up this whole, in this context, it is a private network. They already have something called LoRaWAN technology. They already have something called Wi-Fi. They already have some kind of bespoke access technologies. And of course, they will have VoLTE and all of these things. But it is not that I'm going to say that you don't need all of them, but from the usage of this, from the usage or the use cases what he is looking at, in terms of if somebody has to, if steel manufacturing is the context, if I take it, how does his capacity of the steel production increasing by putting this additional 5G? How does his logistics behind the procurement of this, in again, it is a steel manufacturing, if I take it, the movement within, the heavy, the pellets or whatever, the heavy steel items which they have been moving within their yard, how does that, from a productivity perspective, they are looking at it. Each one of them, there is a technology element to it. There is a video surveillance, there is a sensor, there is a robotics, there is lots of other individual technological things which are aiding this production output. But here, the purpose is how this production output is getting better, rather than me going or any technological service provider or technology provider who has been talking, saying that I have 5G, this will give you something. That means nothing to him. The language definitely is how his X number of steel material, what he has been producing, is moving from X to Y location, and then it is moving at this particular efficiency, and hence this is giving this many dollars to him. That's how the whole conversation is happening. And that's why, as I said earlier, in fact, that's what even some of the panelists also mentioned. It is always what is it, the additional delta which I am seeing, rather than whether the 5G is being put in place or whether 5G plus is a requirement actually. That's the way I look at it.
All right. No, thanks for that, Madhu. I think it's a good perspective about, thinking from the client's perspective, right? About what is the right solution for them, etc. Now, Sandeep, considering I have the benefit of having you on the panel from an operator perspective, if I look at the two segments, right, a B2C and a B2B, and putting the client at the center, like Madhu just said. So how do you see the role of an operator versus other ecosystem participants? Obviously, it's an evolving subject. There's no, definitive answer, but any thoughts on how the ecosystem is going to work for you?
Yeah, I think very valid point, and I think as we say that every G brings something new, and 5G along with other technology advancements is bringing something new in terms of the ecosystem itself. Now traditionally, if you go with a understanding that what will make things work, you'll think about 4 ingredients. You need the CSPs, which is the service providers. You need the device or sensors and end devices. And they need an application, and obviously at this time we're talking about how cloud service providers can play a role. But let's talk about 2 other things that I think will be very important. And today in the morning, our Honorable Prime Minister gave this hint that in this ecosystem, interestingly, the consumer will play a role which is very, very important. And the consumer here could be a B2C consumer or a B2B consumer, which is about private networks. I think this is going to be the game changer in terms of making 5G successful, is that you give the possibilities of this technology to the consumer in the hands of enterprises, and they, knowing their businesses, will come back to you and tell you that what exactly we can do together. So this whole collaboration of the industry working with the enterprises, working with the industries, really will bring forth many things that we are not even realizing today what are possible with 5G. I think that's even valid on the B2C side, because things are really not known as to what exactly could be done. But as consumer touch and feel this technology and the benefits of it, I'm sure there will be a lot more that will come in terms of immersive experience, components of metaverse, components of drone touching both the B2C as well as the B2B segment, and a lot will happen. And I think the next thing which we all now very much realize is the startup ecosystem. I think we really see a startup ecosystem which is becoming very, very powerful in India, and obviously is going to bring in more and more unicorns going forward. At Airtel, we really respect that partnership, and now we're obviously talking about a few hackathons where we really invite startups to come in and talk to us as to what they can do. Again, they are also in some form consumers trying to become the producers, and we give them platform not only from an investment perspective or opportunities of investment from our side to them, but also the playground or the platform where they can come and test their technologies on our network. So I think this is a unique way that we see that things will move forward. One, we are saying that the consumer will play a role in producing, and second is we need to bring talent from everywhere to really make things happen and enable them. That's our thoughts.
No, it's a great perspective, Sandeep. I think to your point about collaboration within the ecosystem, you've introduced a new lens about not just ecosystem, but also collaborate with the end customer, right? To co-create, co-design, and get to the outcomes as well. So last up, Ashwini, on the same topic, again, you have different positions in the value chain as well, some of which, enable 5G, some of which compete with 5G, right? So in this ecosystem, so what do you think is the way the ecosystem can come together?
It's exactly like that. In some instances, there will need to be fiber to the house, fiber to the premises. And in some instances where it might be impractical, too time consuming, too expensive to do that, 5G will be the fiber to the premise.
Right.
But there is such a lot to do before that. I think one of the earlier panelists mentioned that in India, broadband connectivity to household is less than 10% of all households. So India, in fact, has something like 300 million households, and FTTH is only about 19 million, so well under the 10% mark. We also heard that the data traffic, as a result of 5G, as a result of general digitization, will be 4 times, 5 times, in the next 4 or 5 years. That will also mean that at the network layer, the backbone, the digital backbone as we at STL call it, will also need to treble in size. India lays about 20 million fiber kilometers a year. That's going to have to become 60 million every year for the next several years. And a point that has not yet been discussed, but I think the sector, the ecosystem, and all the panelists represent that, is that we must build a very, very high quality, resilient infrastructure. Imagine the expectations that we are creating here in this conference. Imagine the expectations of the Prime Minister and the government. We cannot let our stakeholders down. So that quality angle has to be very explicit, it has to be baked into the solutions, and we must safeguard that. I want to address another point at the other end of the spectrum in terms of the ecosystem. So we spoke about the need for solution integration, which absolutely has to happen. But there is a layer beyond that. We should anticipate, and in fact, it is happening already, that so many technologies moving in parallel. We have 5G, we have machine learning, we have analytics, we have nanotechnologies, robotics, you name it. They will change how work is done, where it gets done, and who does the work. So there's already a lot of talk about job losses because of automation. And in India in particular, with 1.5 billion people almost, we have to be very, very cognizant of that. That aside, one of the biggest barriers to adoption of technology in organizations is resistance to change, simple as that. So somebody must work on the cultural aspects as well. And that means explaining to people, B2C, B2B, the individuals out there, why it's in their interest, why it makes sense to change the way things are being done today, to change mindsets, to change behaviors. It's a massive, massive issue, because without that, technologies and use cases won't get adopted. I will pause there.
No, I think well said, Ashwini. I think to your point about, educating and getting a lot of the participants on board, that's going to be a key thing. And I think we've had a very rich discussion on the ecosystem that needs to come together for 5G. And like we've said, we have a variety of panelists here who represent different parts of the value chain. And clearly the only message we're hearing is about one of optimism, one about collaboration, one of working together. So that's, I think, pretty much the way this industry will evolve going forward. With that, we're coming up to the top of the hour. So what we'll do is, maybe as a summary, we'll just go to the table and quickly talk about where we are at this point in time, in place in time. We have a lot of energy, excitement, which we heard from the Prime Minister, the government, and the industry as well, about what's the art of the possible, what can we do, what do we want to do. We also have global headwinds, economic, from different geographies, a lot of inflation, supply chain issues, etc. So given all of this, right, maybe we'll go again each in turn, a quick summary about what you think is the readiness or maturity, right, to really take advantage of 5G right now. And is there any role of the government in really helping move things along, in accelerating this, right? Again, maybe start with you, Ashwini.
Sure. First of all, I think everybody in the room and everybody on the panel should congratulate themselves. Take a moment to celebrate. I was here, thank you. I was here, all of you were there around the year 2000. We were still figuring out the licensing regime in those days. Telecom calls were still expensive. I don't know, we had maybe 100 million subscribers, something like that. Fast forward to 2010, 10 years later, we had 4G starting to come in, a few 100 million subscribers, mobile phones, mobile telephony, smartphones becoming highly affordable. And another 10 years later, meaning around now, we have one unicorn a month. We have 100 unicorns in India. So this is not that long a time. So from 4G to having 100 unicorns in India is in only 10 years. So something has gone right big time in this country, right? So the industry, obviously the governments need to take credit for that. So I also feel that the readiness is actually quite high. The vision that the Honorable Prime Minister articulated in the morning is right up there with countries like Korea and the US and China, particularly his emphasis on a digital mindset. So yes, we will build the networks, we'll have affordable devices, we'll have artificial intelligence and software and services, which are native strengths in India by now. But I think the mindset vision is very, very strong. I think the government can do something more, still continue to do that. On the one hand, promote the development of true differentiation, intellectual property, something unique, something that makes distinct an India strength. So that supporting role, encouraging R&D, encouraging education, digitization at a mass scale. So clearly that supporting role to play. And we heard about the large investments going into the sector in the morning. But equally, on the other hand, they have a, let's say, a policeman role to play. So keeping everybody on their toes, keeping the whole massive program on track. That is the government's job as well. And I think we should expect that that should happen, and that will make sure that the ecosystem proceeds at pace, because there are always segmented and individual interests in the ecosystem which ought not to be allowed to hold back the entire ecosystem's progress. Thank you.
All right. No, thanks, Ashwini. I think, like you said, the government has a role in terms of making sure we have the eye on the prize, which is about, making sure innovation continues, making sure that, we don't lose sight of the quality of service, or we don't settle for something good enough, right? So Sandeep, from your perspective, right? So last time around, when we had the physical IMC, the industry was very different in terms of where we are. So given all that has changed, we had COVID, we had a huge transformation in our digital usage, in the viability of the sector, etc. So given where we are now, again, your take on how we are placed, what does the government need to do?
I think we all acknowledge the efforts of government, and we really are having high gratitude towards the policy reforms that came last year, the way the spectrum allocations happen in this auction, the simplification of the processes, the engagement. I think it's become very simple to, I would say relatively simple to engage and do business in terms of getting these, approvals. So I think everything is getting positive. We really appreciate that those efforts. The momentum should continue from here on. And I think we're really looking forward that how government can use the spectrum just from a wireless perspective when you talk about in complement to the other ways of reaching to the rural India. And I think the whole effort as we talk, getting to understand that the fiber to the Gram Panchayat is a very good initiative, but I'm sure that there can be initiatives like this where you can take spectrum and use the spectrum that is unused today and give this with an obligation for a rollout rather than going to the auction route every time. So I think, I'm sure that there will be more discussions around how the spectrum can be put best to use, how the investments of $20 billion in spectrum from operators can really be incentivized for better rollouts and I would say for new opportunities in enterprise market. And I think overall, we also heard from Mr. Kishore Babu talking about how the enterprise verticals can really engage along with DOT and the service providers to really bring forward the right applications and the use cases. And I think that should continue momentum as well. A lot of these industries, ministries need to work along with DOTs and stakeholders from the telecom side to really make things happen and things come live. As B2C is coming live, we need to really see the B2B segment coming live as well.
All right. No, great perspective, Sandeep. I think to your point, the government can continue to iron out any roadblocks in a lot of other ministries, and also a good point about efficient allocation of resources, right? So how do we best manage that? So Madhu, from your perspective about how we are placed, what can the government do? What do you think is the need of the hour?
I won't repeat what all, I 100% echo what both of them mentioned. It has been a fantastic journey. It can only go up from here, rather upper end from here. That's how I look at it. Because the way as a country we have come out of pandemic at the back of the digitization strength itself, I think that's a commendable, it's a big thing as a country itself we have come down. But when you look at it, see from a pure from a, with 5G being there or the 5G plus new technologies coming in, I broadly classify this whole communication ecosystem itself. Earlier, predominantly, it used to be from a human to human, man to man kind of thing. I just expand that into man, machine, material, and then into the way methodology of how this whole communication is reaching. Then the market in which we are empowering this whole communication. If I just cut across this broad 5 M's of spectrum, if you take it, I think more and more enterprises would need to be enabled or empowered purely from a policies or perspective, that how can those ability be given to those enterprises to put these various communication methodologies and also look at how this technology could be used at the spectrum what is there with them, and then utilize that complete digitization journey. That's how the acceleration which I would be putting in. Otherwise, it has been an exciting journey for us. And then the kind of recent phenomena what we went through in terms of spectrum allocation along with government, service providers and all of them, I think it has been one of the fantastic processes which we have gone through as such. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Madhu. I think, Monika, your take, please, on what are the maturity roadblocks? What can the government do to support?
So, I think, personal opinion, but I think the government has done their job now. It's for us to do the job. And why I say it is for us to do the job is that it is for us collectively and all here and perhaps everyone here to make it a success. Because if I take the case of enterprises, what is it that the enterprises need to do now? So one, with it now being commercially launched, we have to get out of a POC and piloting phase and start thinking commercial deployments. So when we start thinking that, what is it that the enterprises have to do? I think the enterprises have 2 key roles to do. One, like what Suvesh brilliantly mentioned, find out all the areas where all these new solutions can help them. And two, be mentally prepared how to handle this change. I think if they get over that initial resistance to change, the journey is initiated. But I think on the solution provider side, there is a clear gear shift which is needed. We have to now start thinking about solutions which are commercially deployable ready. It's no longer a POC pilot, so we have to look at how mature the solution is. What is the roadmap? What is the current shelf life? What happens when the next version comes? Is it backward compatible? Is it not? What is the impact of hardware on the running software, APIs and all? So, and there is a difference in all these aspects when you think POC pilot versus when you think commercial deployment. And if the solution providers, each of them in their scope can think about a commercial ready solution or a product, it will be a big confidence building measure towards the enterprises. I think that's the lead up here.
All right. No, a great perspective, Monika. I think to your point, it's about the government has done their job and we need to do ours. That's a great perspective. So Suvesh, last up, at your take on the same topic, please.
I think I'll continue my position of presenting a simplified perspective. In Adani, I had the opportunity to build Adani data networks from scratch, brick by brick. In it, there were two major interactions with the government and DOT. One was acquiring license, and one was participating in the spectrum auction. In both the instances, the experience far exceeded our expectations in every respect, in every way. Every engagement, every conversation, every email exchange, it was an amazing thing. I think, as the fellow panelists said, DOT or the government had done its best. It's for us to do now what we have to do to meet the vision that our River PM shared earlier in the day. That's one part. Second part was about use cases. When we started our journey, when we look at the business cases, we listed about 40 use cases. We realized that we can't attack them in one go. It's impossible, simply not possible. So we took again a simplification approach, that what can we do in the first 6 months? So we have brought it down, we have filtered the 40 use cases into 6 use cases, where the CPs are available, the amount of system integration needed is less. We have some amount of internal competency available to interface the sensors with the communication systems, and we are now working on an implementation blueprint along that. Once we go along this path, we'll learn something, we gain confidence, we'll take another set of 6 to 8 use cases, build on the knowledge that we acquired to go a bit deeper, have more deeper system integration exercises undertaken, and take a gradual approach. That's the approach we will take. So we are going to start with a set of simplified use cases and then learn and then go ahead based on the learning to create more deeper and complex use cases going forward. That's all.
Thank you, Suvesh. I think that wraps up, the third part of the segment. I think clearly picking up on what we heard from the panelists, one is that we sense a clear sense of optimism, right, about looking forward to the opportunity at hand, and a clear belief in the India story. And I would like to echo the same sentiment. I'm a big believer in India story, specifically the digital India story. During my consulting career, I've had a chance to work and live in different countries. And coming back to India from Silicon Valley, and the kind of adaptability, the animal spirit in India is just to be seen, to be believed. And that's why you see globally the narrative is about India as the bright spot for the economy globally, and the kind of transformation we can do with our can-do spirit is something that the whole world is looking for. And like we heard from the panelists, the key thing is to make sure that we deliver on quality as well, not just on just giving a solution which just works, but something which stands the test of time and quality as well. So with that, I'd like to thank my panelists for such an enriching discussion, and a big round of applause for them for their valuable insights. All right, thank you everyone. You've been a great audience as well. Thank you.